Live from New York, it's the show that is wishing you an absolutely delightful Thanksgiving. It's First Things First. Today, MVP odds, Hurts at 1, then Lamar, Mahomes, Tua, Purdy, and Dak tied. So he's in the periphery of the conversation, but after Thanksgiving, will he really be in the conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's got to be on the very short list already, and I don't know how Brew thinks, but I think he's going to cook tomorrow, and it's going to be one of the most watched football games of the year because the Cowboys game on Thanksgiving is always one of the most watched games of the year. And after tomorrow, he's of the quarterbacks. Now, you guys know I feel it doesn't have to go to a quarterback, and this year Myles Garrett's got the best case. Right. But of the quarterbacks, you can't make a compelling case for any quarterback over Dak Prescott that's like, oh, yeah, he's clearly ahead of him. There's not one. And Dak has to overcome the fact that he had a really bad game, but every one of the candidates has. Jalen had a brutal game against the Jets. You had the Tua against the Eagles and the Chiefs played poorly. Lamar against Pittsburgh and Cleveland. Purdy in that entire 3-game stretch. Mahomes, who's on the list.
Heightened it with Purdy.
No, he had 3. You disagree that Brock Purdy had 3 bad games in a row, Brew? I don't want to argue about Brock Purdy right here. I'm just being honest. Patrick Mahomes, who has not had an MVP caliber season, but I'll mention him because he was on the full screen, played very poorly against Denver 2 weeks ago in the game, or 3 weeks ago in the game they lost, and didn't really play well against the Jets. Remember, that's when Robert Saleh said, we've embarrassed all the quarterbacks. Patrick was one of the guys on the list. And so he also, to me, has the body of work, and I know it is a single-season award, but if I understand some guys being like, wait, really, is that guy going to be the league MVP? Dak Prescott in 2019 threw for 4,900 yards, had 30 touchdowns, 11 picks. In 2020, he was hurt. In 2021, he threw for 4,400 yards, had 37 touchdowns, and 10 picks.
So you think there's got to be some MVP roots?
No, well, I don't think there has to be, but I think that
you're going down the career achievement award route?
No, that's not. Maybe I stated it wrong. I apologize. The point that I am making is there is a level of skepticism to Dak, who is the star quarterback for one of the best teams in the league, and we can show you his numbers, who is having a great statistical season, that to me does not marry with the fact that it's not like this is an out-of-nowhere great statistical season. And Brew, since that one bad game, he has been statistically the best quarterback in the league since the Niners game, statistically speaking. And by the way, they haven't lost. And so, yes, I think Dak is firmly in the top rung of the MVP race.
Look, I think he'll be in the conversation like he is now. I do think he'll play well tomorrow and they'll beat Washington, but I think he'll remain about where he is, 5th, 6th, right outside the periphery of the top tier leaders. And here's the problem for Dak. The 3 guys at the top of this list, Hurts, Mahomes, and Lamar, they are viewed as the reason their teams win. They're viewed as the reason even still Mahomes. Because even as great as that defense is, take Mahomes off that team and we're not ever talking about them. All right, they're a mediocre team at best.
But that's not what people think of Philly.
I would disagree. I think Jalen Hurts with his leadership, I do think he is viewed, everybody else is great, but he is, remember what they were before he got there.
No, I know, but don't people with Philly, don't they say they have the best roster in the league and they're great on both sides of the ball?
But they say Philadelphia. I do think Jalen Hurts is clearly viewed as like the leader of that team.
That I totally agree.
I think with Purdy and Dak, and now I think people have realized it with Tua, they are a part of it, a big part of it, but they're not like the reason, or as you would even say, the best player on their teams. Okay, so I think that's the first thing that's against Dak. The second, there's 2 other things. The second thing is this, Nick, of the game managers, and I'm going to say that's Purdy and Dak. I think Purdy has the better argument than Dak. And here it is.
Go ahead.
Dak, he's beaten Dak head-to-head and had 4 touchdowns, no picks in that game. Dak, of course, had 3 interceptions, 1 touchdown. And Dak has not beaten anybody. He hasn't beaten a winning team this year. The teams he's beaten are combined 21 and 51. Purdy has some big victories. Jacksonville, Dallas, Pittsburgh, where he played well in those games as well. And then statistically, so Purdy's got the better wins. He's got the better stats because he's better than Dak in passer rating, completion percentage, yards per attempt, yards per game.
He's got the best stats of anybody in the league.
Touchdowns, interceptions are close.
Yep.
18-5, 19-6 for Dak, so that's a wash. But I think if the top three guys, and I'm with you, I don't think any of them really deserve it. If they falter, though, to the point where they're not going to win it, and it comes down to game managers, I think Purdy should be ahead of Dak right now.
I guess the problem I have with almost the setup of that. You just assign Dak Prescott in the game manager category.
Yeah, I think that's what it is.
Right, and so I just don't think we have evidence of that. He came into the league a game manager. But 4 years ago, he almost threw for 5,000 yards, and he had 30 touchdowns.
Did they have a good year that year?
No, they were mediocre. They were mediocre,
like
right?
That.
But that's
what people. The thing with Dak is that he can put up big numbers, but not when they win.
Okay, except for the fact that when they were a 12-win team 2 years ago, he had 37 touchdowns, 10 picks, and 4,400 yards. And last year, he had good raw numbers, except for the interceptions were off the charts, and they won 12 games. This year, they're pacing to win 12 games.
But
and
guess whose numbers are better? Brock Purdy.
Yes, Brock
Even
Purdy's,
just total, gaudy numbers as far as yards per game.
I agree with all that. The point that I'm saying is I don't think Dak Prescott, I don't put him in the game manager category like you're assigning him to. And the Purdy conversation when it comes to MVP, he is going to win right now the statistical argument against every player. And so if it is based purely on that, there is no counter to it. The strong argument against Purdy is, while I agree with you, Micah Parsons is the best player on the Cowboys, I believe Dak Prescott is clearly the best player on the Cowboys offense. With respect to CeeDee Lamb, I think Dak Prescott's better, and he certainly is one of the top two guys on the Cowboys offense, and there is real debate about that with Brock Purdy. Is he one of the best four guys on his own offense? That's where I think there is, because obviously stats, just by stats, right, Purdy'd be running away with it.
Can I push back on that? I know I've been painted with the Purdy brush. The completion percentage of Purdy is 70.2. Dak's is 70.1.
Right.
Yeah, but
so we can say that
but otherwise.
Okay, here's the other one. Yards per game. Purdy is 278.3.
Yeah.
Oh, it's 4 yards. It's one touch. Well, Dak's got the lead for one touchdown. It's
the
one
biggest
interception.
Is obviously the passer rate.
I know, but we're Purdy's going to run away with it.
Right, no.
A big game
from Dak. Well, is that total yards per game includes rushing, right?
Yeah.
Because passing is about 15, 20 yards a game, which I get it. That's not huge.
It can still change. So if Dak jumps Purdy, which he easily could.
It's going to be decided. Both of these teams have some big games. So it's going to be decided. And again, it's not just those two, but I'm saying – they're going to, the cream's going to rise to the top.
Yeah, I mean, listen, at the end of the year, I have faith in the NFL MVP voters. Brock Purdy is not going to be the league's MVP. I think Dak Prescott could be. I think that
you don't think there's any chance Purdy could?
No,
just because
I think that there is too much, and again, maybe. And I'm a huge part of it, I understand. And maybe we'll be proven wrong, but I doubt it. I think there is too much residue almost of just so recently seeing last year Jimmy Garoppolo put up amazing numbers and then fall apart. And then also, of all the MVPs, while they've all had bad games, Purdy's the only one who's had a bad extended stretch. And so you've had other guys with a bad game here or a bad game there. Dak, in my opinion, has only really had one bad game. Even the Cardinals game, he wasn't great, but he wasn't terrible. Yeah. The Purdy, that 3-game stretch, plus the skepticism because of the Shanahan system, and that I just don't think he's going to be league MVP.
Can I ask you a question? Because we talked about Dak's going to be on Thanksgiving, but then Purdy plays an hour after that game is over.
Yeah.
Is there anything Purdy can do to change your mind? Because he's kind of in a tough spot. If he throws a nice ball, it's like, well,
no.
Kittle.
No, I told you. That's not true.
That's why I'm asking a real question.
But you know exactly what it is.
There have to be some injuries.
There doesn't.
I don't know. For real.
Yeah, doesn't it have to be some injuries?
No.
And we don't. I know you don't wish that.
No, but
I'm just saying.
I know right now they're fully healthy. So is there anything on Thursday he can do to impress me? Yes. If in the second half of that game, it is a nip and tuck game or they are trailing, and Brock Purdy plays excellent, that will be an important data
really?
point.
Even with McCaffrey and Kittle? What if he throws a slant pattern to Debo and he takes it 50 yards to the house?
Guys,
are you going to give him credit for that?
Now we're like arguing about if this hypothetical thing happens, what will I hypothetically believe? I'm telling you guys that I would like to see him at some point without all the Avengers play well. He can't do that on Thursday. I would like to see him be in a close game down the stretch and play well. And if your point is I'm penalizing him because they're getting out to huge early leads, I am not penalizing him. I am just refusing to anoint him as the leading MVP candidate.
Well,
that's not a penalty.
I'm not even saying that.
Saying you don't get to be the richest man in the world is not a penalty. It's just like I'm just saying you can't. I need to see more win. It'd be one thing, Wildes, if right now they were at a spot where they had never trailed all year. And it's like, well, he's never had the opportunity. Yeah. What do you want from him? He had it in 3 straight weeks. And in my opinion, I know Brew brings up the Browns game where he threw for 125 yards as a game he came through on, but he failed in all three. He did put him in position to win the game. In my opinion, he failed all 3 opportunities. So I would like to see him pass one of those tests.
One of them he was concussed. I think it was really one. He failed one.
He failed all 3. We can argue about why he failed all 3.
You're with me, clearly.
Wow.
Thank you,
I mean, poor Brandon Staley got this. He's trying to be nice. Oh, Brewer, you're expecting an A game from Dallas.
But before you answer that, that was a good response by Micah, right? That's what you want from him?
No, I like
you
that.
Guys, okay, that we should do that too.
I don't know that he believes it, but it was political.
But it was what he was supposed to say.
He kind of looked like he was
like they almost beat the Eagles.
I'm trying to figure out something.
All right, but go ahead.
All right, here we go. Do I expect an A game from the Cowboys? Well, let me see if they meet the criteria. Losing record, check, 4-7.
Here we go.
Embarrassing losses. Let's see. Twice they lost to the Giants. They made Tommy DeVito look like an all-pro. Right. 3 touchdowns, almost 300 yards. And they gave up 40 points in a 20-point loss to the Bears. Check.
That's a very specific
coach on the hot seat. Check. Unfathomable negative statistic. Sam Howell's been sacked 51 times.
What?
Check.
Unfathomable.
Here's finally.
Okay.
Once called frisky by Kevin Wildes.
Part of it.
Check. So yes, the Washington Commanders do indeed meet the criteria.
Okay.
They are tomato cans. So you know what that means.
I don't think they are tomato
cans. They are tomato. I just did the checklist, all right?
Exactly.
If you don't like it, get mad at the checklist
respect
people.
The checklist.
Right. I mean, I don't put the checklist together. I mean, I do, really, but still, it's the checklist. All right, so here's what we should expect.
Okay.
Dak, Micah, Duran, they're going to go crazy. We might see a pick 6. We're going to see a lot of sacks.
Yeah.
And Dak is going to put up big numbers.
Okay.
So, yes, indeed, the Dallas Cowboys on Thanksgiving Day in front of a national TV audience will put up an A game.
Yeah. Wow.
Yes.
Pretty
good. Because, by the way, Brew and I chatted before the show.
Yeah.
We're going to try to find some more opportunities like this one, where he and I are on the same side of an issue against you. Because we realize, America, that Kevin Wildes loves to pit Brew and I against each other.
No, I don't.
And then just hops on the side he ever thinks is winning.
I like
so he always gets to be on the winning argument. But Brew is 100% correct. The Cowboys front is going to eat Sam Howell alive.
Yeah,
so I think Sam Howell's going to roll another 7 this week. That's 7 combined sacks and interceptions, which, by the way, he has done in 4 of his 11 games this year. It's happened, for some context to it, 0 times to Mahomes in his whole career. Sam Howell right now is sacked or throws a pick on 13% of his dropbacks. So that means 1 in every 7 or 8 pass plays ends in disaster.
Airing that
that's
thing out,
not, though. And now that's when the Commanders have the ball. When the Cowboys have the ball, the Washington D is 29th overall in yards, 30th overall against the pass, and in Brew's favorite stat, dead last in points allowed. So you have a terrible defense that, by the way, some of those games were played when they had Sweat and Chase. Now they're both gone. They drafted a first-round corner. He's been benched throughout the year, or not the entire year, but at times in the year. Their secondary's banged up and not that good. And here's the other thing. This year, and we can show it to you, massive favorites at home are not losing. They're 13-0. They're 9. They cover the number 9 out of 13 times, and it's blowouts.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I totally agree with Brew that even though it's a divisional game, I think the Cowboys absolutely roll Wildes' beloved.
Not beloved.
Come on.
First,
You were trying to get him in the show a lot.
I said Sam Howell was the real deal. You're like,
went with
who's
him
Sam
yesterday.
Howell?
You
well,
pubbed him for like 5 minutes yesterday.
he leads
on
the
mountain.
league in passing.
Yeah.
That's something.
You picked him.
Jameis Winston
You
did
picked
that.
him to go to the playoffs.
And guess what? He was a dark horse MVP.
That's true.
He doesn't. Gosh darn it, bro. We had him getting on the ropes. And you let him get
Cowboys have won their games by an average of 22 points. So I also agree that's going to. Yeah.
Tomato can. We got another one to add.
Now he's just with
We'll have another one to add to the list.
NFC odds: Philly at 1, San Francisco at 2. Nick is actively checking his text to see if anyone liked that take.
That's not
Dallas at 3, Detroit followed by Seattle. Who is more dangerous? A more dangerous threat to the Eagles, the 49ers or the Cowboys?
I think it's definitively Dallas. Because,
Really?
so it's, and again, I want to be clear here. I am not saying Dallas is definitively better than San Francisco. In fact, if they play each other heads up, it is very hard to say Dallas would beat San Francisco. But I think that Philly, and I spent a lot of time yesterday giving Philly credit, and I'm not disparaging them. But I do think they have a weakness that Dallas can more easily exploit than San Francisco, and that we've seen it, which is Dak cooks them up on the back end. And in part, that is because, obviously, San Francisco, when they're rolling, has a potent offense. But a point Brew has made, which is a fair one, is aside from Trent Williams, at various times this year, that Niners offensive line has been gettable, right? And so I think the Dallas offensive line, can hold up against the Philly pass rush, which is what they do so incredibly well, better than San Francisco can. So Dak has more of an opportunity to cook in this theoretical matchup than Purdy. And Philadelphia, despite what Kansas City did, Philadelphia has the best run defense in football. Kansas City ran on them, but prior to that, nobody had. It was the most yards they'd allowed since week 1 of last year. The Niners' attack starts with the reason that guys do run open and all those things is because of the run concepts. The Shanahan attack is based on McCaffrey and the run that then opens up everything in the pass. I think the Eagles can defend the Niners' run game better, and Dallas doesn't really care to run the ball. Like, I don't want to say they don't care to, but they are not a run-first team. And so I think Dallas is more likely to if the question is, if the Eagles have home field, who's more likely to go to the Link and win? I think it's unquestionably Dallas, a team that has won there before, that has had success, played there this year, played super close. So I think it's the Cowboys.
Look, I do think the Cowboys, if they meet the Eagles in the playoffs, even though I'll pick the Eagles, it won't be like there's no way Dallas can beat them. They are a tough matchup, and they play Philly close, as we've seen. But I'm going to go with San Francisco. We really haven't seen San Francisco and Purdy against Philadelphia because last year, you know, when Purdy got hurt. And I also think, Nick, and this is something that is just going to have to play itself out. The last few times we've seen Dallas in big playoff games, it's ended horribly. Like, it's the execution, lack of execution, the lack of game management, clock management, all that. And Dak is a big part of that, as well as obviously Mike McCarthy. So I think at that, I would give the advantage to San Francisco. Obviously, head-to-head, you go with San Francisco. But I think, Nick, these teams, I think, are the most physical teams in the league. Pittsburgh, not in this order, Pittsburgh, Baltimore, Cleveland, Kansas City, Philadelphia, and San Francisco. Those are the big punchers in the NFL. Those are the knockout artists. Dallas not on that list. I think they're a little bit more finesse. At least when San Francisco played them, they couldn't match up with that toughness. And so that's why I give San Francisco an edge. And San Francisco's beaten good teams, as I said earlier. Dallas, Kansas City.
When did San
or not Kansas City. Who they beat Dallas, Jacksonville.
Yeah, you were thinking he was thinking of the Prince and the King.
You know who's thrown for the most yards against the Eagles?
This year?
Yeah.
Sam Howell.
Yeah, Sam Howell.
Yeah,
97.
How many interceptions in that game?
Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get more from the show and to check out clips from other shows on FS1.